The honourable member from Flamborough-Glanbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister's radical environment minister is launching a war on cars. He said that their government has decided to stop investing in new road infrastructure. The radical minister did not clarify his remarks. Rather, he went even further, adding that these Liberals plan to block big projects. For example, the Highway 6 South expansion, which is so critical to the safety of people in my community. Why are these Liberals attacking commuters in the GTHA who are just trying to get to work?
Good question. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
It's all a bit rich, Mr. Speaker, to continue to hear the Conservatives talk about road infrastructure in particular, but infrastructure in general, which they continued to cut in their time in office and would do the same if they were back in power. He mentions the GTA, for example. Let me give you an example. $2.3 billion to build the Scarborough subway extension, $1.9 billion to build the Eglinton Crossway West extension, over $2 billion to build the Yonge North subway extension, $4 billion to build the Ontario line. There's other examples from the GTA. I thank the Liberal members of this caucus for advocating for all of this.
The honourable member from Flamborough-Glanbrook.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the previous Conservative government invested significantly in roads and highways in the GTA, Ontario, and Canada. So that non-answer doesn't cut it. Canadians already pay plenty of taxes, sending their money to Ottawa and expecting the government to build roads and infrastructure. Yet this Prime Minister and his radical minister would endanger the lives of Hamiltonians by not supporting projects like the Highway 6 South expansion. Will the Prime Minister stand up for Canadians and reject his radical environment minister?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Almost 3,000 road and bridge projects in Ontario, Mr. Speaker. That's just one example. I remember in this House of Commons when this government moved forward to talk with Windsor, to engage with Governor Rick Snyder in the state of Michigan years ago to make sure that the Gordie Howe Bridge would be a reality, and they were against it. $6 billion to make sure that's a reality. It's happening, and this government stands by that decision. The Conservatives have let down the people of Windsor. Thank you to the member for Windsor-Tecumseh for being there for his constituents.
The honourable member from Chilliwack Hope.
When the Prime Minister appointed a radical activist to be the Environment Minister, we knew that this Liberal government would be implementing extreme and divisive policies, but this latest Liberal announcement takes the cake. This may be the first time that any government anywhere at any time has promised to stop building roads, but that's exactly what the Liberals have done. This extreme new policy means that these Liberals are against adding more lanes to the Trans-Canada Highway between Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley. Why do the Liberals want to kill these projects, which will help end gridlock and get people to work?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Very interesting, Mr. Speaker. He should have checked the record. It's stunning. As a BC MP, he voted against over $1 million for the 100-mile horse Loke-Ridden Road Bridge replacement in that province. It's an example of Conservative hypocrisy on the other side. On the one hand, they want to stand for infrastructure investment and supporting roads. On the other hand, anytime this government has attempted to do that, they've voted against it. We'll continue to work with provinces, with municipalities to make that a reality, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Chilliwack Hope.
This radical minister made it very clear that this Liberal government will no longer allow funding to go towards building roads. And it's no surprise that a guy that scaled the CN Tower or climbed on top of a premier's roof would come up with an extreme policy like building no more roads in this country. We need a strong road network to move our goods, to get our kids to school, and to get our workers to their jobs. So when will the Prime Minister condemn this radical policy from his extremist environment minister and stop punishing Canadians who need to drive their cars to live their lives?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
More slogans from the other side, Mr. Speaker. More slogans. And you know why it's a slogan, Mr. Speaker? Because there's no sincerity. And there's no sincerity because they want to cut funding to cities. They want to cut funding to towns. Every time we've put measures on the table to make sure that municipalities are better supported and provinces are there with us, they've stood in the way of that. I've given examples here today. The Gordie Howe Bridge in my province. I just gave an example from his province. He's let down his constituents in the approach that he's taken. It's not a serious approach. It never was, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member from Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock.
Speaker, a few months ago, I asked the Minister of the Environment why, after 3 years, has Parks Canada not replaced the federal bridge in Bolsover? The Minister, of course, answered in typical Liberal fashion, promised to get back to the House and never actually did, but now we know why. News broke earlier this week that the Liberals have decided to stop funding new roads and bridges. And just like that, Parks Canada quietly confirms that the bridge will not be replaced. Leaving this village permanently cut in half is absolutely unacceptable. When will the minister get his head out of the clouds, do his job, and get the bridge fixed?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
I know that member, and I've known him for many years to be someone who brings a nonpartisan approach, but such is the approach of the Leader of the Opposition that even someone like him has taken a decidedly a partisan approach to such critical issues. What do we see? 3,000 or nearly 3,000 road and bridge projects at $2.1 billion funded by this government, but they've supported none of it, Mr. Speaker. I just mentioned the Ontario example of the Gordie Howe Bridge. They're talking about building bridges. We'll continue to do whatever we can to support communities large and small throughout this province.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's radical Environment Minister is waging open war on cars. He declared that his government had decided to stop investing in new road infrastructure. And he didn't clarify his remarks. He went even further by adding that the Liberal government was going to block major projects. Mr. Speaker, the radical Environment Minister is going to block major projects like the third link between Quebec City and Lévis. Why is the Liberal government attacking workers in Lévis, Quebec, who are trying simply to get to work? The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons. What the member across the way knows full well is that this government, over our time on this side of the House, has invested billions upon billions of dollars in infrastructure, in road infrastructure throughout Quebec, throughout Canada, and we will continue to do so, as we have done in Kamouraska, for example, with Road 195, and what we will no doubt continue to do so in his riding. And he'll probably vote against all these projects, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, when was the last time a radical minister and muzzled minister drove through the Lévis-Quebec region without his limousine? Building the third link won't be a luxury because it's a necessity. Quebecers in remote regions pay taxes and send their money all the way to Ottawa, which is supposed to build reliable roads and infrastructures for them as well. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister defend the interests of Quebecers in remote regions instead of following the anti-third link folly of his radical Environment Minister?
Not take, please not, I
would like to ask all members to make sure that they hold their tongue when it is not their turn to speak. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House. The Honourable Member knows full well that this government has invested billions upon billions of dollars in road infrastructure projects, highways in Quebec, for example, and throughout Canada. We're the second largest country in the world. We know full well, Mr. Speaker, that we have to invest to build better roads for our constituents, for Canadians and for businesses. But every time this member votes against our investments in highways, he votes in systematically against everything that the government is doing for Quebec. He needs to make sure that people know this.